Buffs Nation, what's going on? Again, hope you guys are having a wonderful day. Man, mine got started off great. Again, if you saw my video, PointsBet is doing a really cool promotion where you put down a $50 bet and you can get a free jersey of your choice. So I think it's for all sports. So I went and secured a Bishop Thomas jersey. I'm really excited to add that to my collection in addition to my Carter Stoutmire jersey, which should be in here very soon. But today, really excited also to have Stephen back on from the QB Spotlight. We've been making this a weekly segment where we're talking about Shedeur. We're talking about the rest of quarterback play in college football, and really excited to have him back on the show again. So if you could please hit that like as you're checking in, let me know in the comments who's watching. We'll go ahead and get started. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on Stephen Hamner from the QB Spotlight. Stephen, how's it going?
Awesome. What's up, dude? Thanks for having me on again. Always fun to come and talk quarterback. My voice sounds a little better than last time, so hopefully I give a better performance. It's not a C- again. So
I will glad to see and hear that you're doing better. And man, I look forward to this every week. But man, we got a lot to talk about in terms of let's start with Colorado and Shador Sanders. From a high level view, what was your impressions of his performance this past week against Nebraska? Maybe even compared a little bit to what he did against TCU.
yeah, I thought it was. So I think this was a good example of like having to like watch the game to see how the game on like develops as opposed to just like looking at a box score, right? Like if you just look at PFF's grade, they actually graded Shedeur higher against Nebraska than they did against TCU. So however they do that, right? But with that said, I thought it was impressive because Shedeur, the Colorado offense, had to like adjust their playing style essentially, right? They had to kind of like wait out, not the storm, but like if Sims wasn't turned the ball over like 3 or 4 times, and who knows how the game would have, ended up, right? So with that said, they kept giving Colorado opportunities. When you give a team like that opportunities, eventually they figured it out. Eventually they found the answers. That's kind of exactly what they did. So my takeaway, broad scope, without getting too deep into it yet, I'm sure we will in a second, was just the fact that they were able to adjust their game plan and find a different way to win than what they did against TCU, right? Just found a different way to win.
Yeah. I think that's what I was most impressed with this team is, winning in different styles, in different ways against teams that have different strengths. And the offense definitely surprised me a little bit.
Yep.
At first, I thought that we were going to come out pretty up tempo, guns blazing, all that. And in the first half, it wasn't really that. And from what I've listened to with the press conferences and different things like that, kind of here and there, I haven't really gotten a full answer on that. But what kind of were you expecting, and kind of your assessment of how this game started out, like in the first half for Shedeur?
It was actually, I felt bad for Nebraska's defense. I thought they played so well, especially the first half, first 2.5 quarters, but they just kept getting put in bad situations, right? I thought the defense played really well. They got pressure on Shedeur early. They were dropping 8 guys back, and there just wasn't a bunch of big plays available, especially early in the game. And they were hitting Shedeur. Like they played great. Like they did their defense. Like we talked about last week, like Nebraska's defense was coming to play, and that's exactly what they did. So at the same time, like eventually, if you start giving offense like that many opportunities, like the dam's going to break. And so that's kind of what happened. And with Shedeur, we talked about a few things last week that he needed to do. We talked a lot about attacking the middle of the field. In which he did do that against TCU. He had like 410 yards inside the numbers, just like pa, right? And so Nebraska, probably game plan for that. And so what Shedeur had to do was he spread the ball a bit more as far as it relates to attacking the whole field. Like he had more yards outside the numbers than inside the numbers. I think it was pretty even, if I remember correctly, like 180 something inside, 210 or something ballpark range outside the numbers. So that was an impressive feat because Nebraska probably did some things to try to take that away. Boom, no big deal, able to go outside numbers. And then we saw him use his legs a lot more, not necessarily like running, but just buying time, right? Buying time, letting plays extend. And then you just saw the ability to, like, even with even with Nebraska dropping 8, he was able to still dissect the defense. And, I think Nebraska ran out of steam a little bit. I think Colorado still wins, but I think it's a different game if Sims doesn't give the ball 3 or 4 times to Colorado's offense. That was like a big takeaway for me.
Yeah. I think you hit it right on the head there. I mean, yeah, there were just a ton of mistakes that were made on the Nebraska. And I mean, even with that first field goal, it would have allowed them to get a little bit of momentum, and hits the goalpost. And, it's just a lot of things just weren't going in their direction. And but back to Shedeur, that's very interesting that you brought up the fact that he was having to attack the defense in different spots on the field compared to what he was having success with against TCU. And I think with him being able to move outside the pocket to dodge defenders, I mean, he was able to break some tackles. I was very impressed with him showcasing his, I don't know if you call this like pocket strength, but just his ability to stand in there or move away from those big defenders. I mean, that was a huge deal. And I was very impressed because I would, when I was at the game, I would get all tensed up and nervous, being like, man, I don't want you taking hits. I don't want you making any inerrant throws. And I can't really remember any throws because there were probably a few that he had against TCU, but there weren't really any throws that come to mind that I wish in which he had back in some sense. But let's talk about something else that you alluded to on your video earlier this week talking about Shedeur, and that was play action. We were hoping that we would see Colorado establish a little bit more of a run game. We knew that there was a challenge up with this Nebraska defensive line and front seven and all that. I mean, those are some big boys.
Yep.
I think we had like 1.8, 1.9 yards per carry. Not a lot of play action for Shedeur to work off of.
Yep.
As a former quarterback, how does that affect you, man, when you do not have the play action going for you?
Yeah, no, definitely. The play action is always friendly to the quarterback, but only if the run game is going right. And like you mentioned, y'all had 1 point something yards on the or per carry, and so there was only 6 play action plays. I think the Shedeur was like 3 of 6 in the play action. And we talked before last week how good the play action was against TCU. I think they're like 14 of 15 for however many yards against TCU. Yeah. Another example of hey, they just had to adjust the game plan. Not saying they went in saying we got to do play action, but that was a play that they probably just couldn't do. They couldn't use nearly as much because they're not falling for the play action because they know they can't run against them. So maybe that comes up down the road against other teams. Who knows? But the fact that it was okay, no real play action to assist. It's just straight drop back and throw, and he lit it up. I think it was something like 28 of 37 for like 350. Just on straight dropbacks, right? So another example of the play action is not going to assist. I'm just going to drop straight back and try to beat you a different way, which he did. But yeah, I think it's a good point. And it's kudos to Nebraska's defense for being able to stop the run, but then kudos to Shedeur not just Shedeur, like Sean Lewis. What a great game plan too, right? It's almost like a boxer who took a few hits from Nebraska's defense, can't really do much. Then all of a sudden you find something that works. You kind of keep going back, and then you beat your opponent down, which is kind of the theme of the game. Wouldn't you think? Nebraska came out swinging. If you're just looking at Nebraska defense against Colorado offense, they came out swinging. Colorado took some punches and eventually were able to find what worked and use those answers that worked.
I think that's wonderfully said. And yeah, they did a great job of figuring out the weak points in this defense. And I mean, you saw the floodgates open, especially in the second half. But it was really impressive to see. Again, wasn't getting the ball out of his hands super quickly. Some of that had to do with what kind of defense they were throwing at Shedeur. But man, his ability to create more time, keep his eyes downfield. I mean, he made a handful of throws again on third down that were great. Like third and long. Let me look at the stats here again. Third down efficiency. Again, this is something that we had similar against TCU, is around 50%, 9 of 18 that they were against Nebraska on third down, and some really impressive touchdown throws. The first one to Darvarish Dawson, where is that kind of deep crosser route?
Mm-hmm.
And then the one to Xavier Weaver where he kind of rolled out to the left, to find some guys. And I think all that to say, I've been very impressed with his ability to move.
Yeah.
Dub Will brings up a really good question here that I think we should touch on. He says, Steven, what do you attribute Shedor's high sack total to, so far? I forget how many sacks he took. I think only 2 against TCU, but I think we had a total of 8. A
I
couple
think
of those
so.
were just him running out of bounds.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts on that?
I think it was a mixture, at least against Nebraska, because there were a few times like right before Shador was even 3 steps on his third step drop or on his third step, the defense line was right there. So I think part of it was just the offensive line getting beat. Also with Shador's kind of play style, and this is a lot of good quarterbacks. It's what makes them so good, but it's also something to just work on is they hold on the ball a lot, right? Like they don't want to give up on a play. They don't want to play to die, whether it's they use their legs or they just try to find someone open, try to move around, right? So I kind of think it's a combination. One, some offensive line stuff, especially at the beginning of the game. Like they're probably at least half those sacks were on the offensive line.
Yeah.
Especially at the beginning of the game. And then some of it's just Shador holding on to the ball. Some people may say too long, get the ball out. Other people say, hey, sometimes with a good quarterback like that, you take some of those sacks because of the good plays that come along with holding on to the ball like that, if that makes sense. So it's I think a combination of things. Maybe you have a different answer, David, or if there's something else to add, but I think it's a combo of those two factors.
Yeah, I think there were some instances in which, Nebraska just beat our line, off the ball in some of these in some of these plays, and I think kind of looking forward, again, it takes time for this offensive line to gel. We had Landon Beebe back in there to play this week at right guard, where he didn't play last week, so. We're still kind of finding our mojo together, and that's okay. And I think Nebraska, the size of their front seven, the size of their defensive line, if it's not the biggest defensive line or scariest front seven that we're going to face, all year, it's right up there. So with like Oregon State, I think that's probably who I'm most worried about right now. Utah's defense. Of course, but outside of that, I think somebody that I was listening to just a little while ago, I forget who it was, mentioned how the whole Pac-12 conference only had 3 defensive linemen drafted last year in college football. One was in the 2nd round, and the other 2 were in the 7th round. But we know this. Like the Pac-12 isn't known for having super big front 7 guys, So
Yep.
I think we'll see an improvement from the offensive line moving forward because of that, as well as because of they're going to have more time, playing together. With your experience, like. Let's talk about that a little bit. How long has it taken you, or taken the teams that you've been on normally, to feel like the offensive line has kind of come together and gelled appropriately?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's probably going to be different for each team, but I think a lot of it really does have to do with the offense, right? With the play
Yeah.
calling, like you mentioned, in the game against TCU, they came out, the ball was out so quick, so quick, so quick. So it was almost like making it easier on offense line,
Yeah.
not protecting them per se, but it was kind of playing to their strength. So I think it's not necessarily how long it takes them to gel, as far as how long it takes like the team, the offensive play caller, Sean Lewis, how long it takes them to find like the perfect scenario, the perfect scheme appropriate to help those guys out. At the same time, when you have a good quarterback, sometimes they hold on the ball too long because they don't want a play to go dead, right? So I think you take that too. Sometimes, like, I'm okay taking some sacks. Like, yeah, it's got to be situational football. You don't want to take sacks on bad situations. I guess you never want to take a sack, but I think you can live with taking sacks if you have a quarterback like Shedeur, because the ability to roll out and throw a deep ball at Travis Hunter, like you saw in the opening third quarter, like those type of plays, like that play kind of got the offensive kind of going, and then you saw more deep shots after that, right? So maybe you live taking a few sacks because plays like that lead to bigger plays and scores. Probably didn't really answer your question, but I think it just kind of just depends on the team, the scheme, and kind of the overall structure of what they're trying to accomplish.
No, I really love that perspective because again, it allows me to just kind of understand, what is going through, your head when you're back there, or, what could be an offensive philosophy. Hey, it's okay to be taking a sack every now and then. If it's leading, that kind of play style is leading to a lot more big positive gains, so
Yep.
it's a trade-off, that
Yep.
makes total sense. But right now, man, Shedeur is just absolutely killing it. 31 of 42 for 393 yards, couple touchdowns, had a rushing touchdown as well. Definitely up there, in the Heisman
Yep.
Heisman candidate pool right now with, I think, Travis Hunter. But it's been a great start for him. No interceptions yet. That's been something that's really important, taking care of the ball. But if you don't have any last thoughts on Nebraska, let's talk about a little bit what you're hoping for and looking for with Colorado, with Shador Sanders going into this matchup against Colorado State.
Yeah, I think you don't want to like come out slow, right? Like Colorado State, you're 23.5 point favorites, depending where you're looking at. And so I think you don't want to come out slow. You don't want to keep them in the game. You don't want to give them a reason to stay in the game, right? Like you don't want to go into the fourth quarter and it's 21-13. You're like, oh, okay, like we need to pick it up a little bit, right? So that's probably the biggest thing. And Colorado State has only played one game. I guess they had their bye week 2. Like, is that correct? Am I tripping? Am I totally wrong with that? I'm pretty sure they played only one game in their bye week was last week. I'll talk and let you double check
you're
on
totally
that. Right
about that.
Okay.
I totally missed that.
Yeah, so it's like, and it was to Washington State. Washington State pounded them, and there was some hype going into the game, like, hey, Colorado State, they've got some traction. This is going to be their year. It's going to bounce back. And I still think I like their coach Norvell, and I think they got some good stuff going on. And they made a quarterback change, which we can get to later if you'd like. But I think if you're Shedeur and you're Colorado, like you don't want a slow start, like and I don't think they'll have that with who their coach is, right? I think they'll get them ready. But yeah, biggest thing, like you don't want to sleepwalk through it. You don't want to be at risk in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is something in which I'm hoping that we work on, from last week, and kind of getting off to a slow start, 0-0 first quarter. I would love for us to get out to a lead, play with that high tempo. I'd love to see them, work and emphasize establishing a run game against this opponent. Get those guys having some success on the ground, understanding what it's feeling like, and really make the day easy for Shedeur, being able to rely on play action. I think you mentioned first week 14 of 15 off of play action. This past week, still high success rate, 3 of 6, but only 6 passes off of play action. And I would like to see some more of that. But I think I'm going to be continuing to expect Shedeur to put up big numbers. That's what I want. As a fan, I want to see him, lift that Heisman Trophy. So hopefully he, if he's breaking his own record in single game passing yards, 510 that he set against TCU, depending on how long he plays, I would love to see something like that happen. But I got a feeling we'll emphasize the run game a little bit more. But any other thoughts on Colorado State?
Yeah, I guess I can hit the quarterbacks just real quick if anyone in the chat is interested, because they started a guy named Clay Millen last year and this year, and he was a guy who was getting some hype going to camp, and just he showed flashes last year, but nothing really stuck out, but showed flashes. You heard a lot of good things coming up, but he's actually being, I believe, benched. I don't think he's hurt, but he's not starting week 2. So in week 1 against Washington State, Clay went like 15-24 for $116. A pick, and only like 4 or 5 yards per attempt, just not any vertical shots. Yikes. Then they put in Braden Fowler Nicolosi, which I'm not even going to pretend. Yeah, I haven't watched him play, but the output was much better. Now, it was probably against a different defense. They probably weren't doing the exact same thing they were doing against Mill in the first quarter or second quarter, but he still led like 210 yards, had like 10+ yards per attempt, had a few touchdowns. Like, I had a spark, right? So these guys are going to take a little more chances. So I found that interesting, because you heard such good things about Clay Millen last year.
Yeah.
But now, you've probably heard him being up there, right? You've probably heard
Yeah.
of the talk. But I think Norvell is a good coach. I think Mum is a really good OC for Colorado State. If they don't get it figured out this game, I think Colorado State's gonna have a much better season this year than last season. I really like their whole staff. I like what they did in Nevada. So I think they're in a good position moving forward overall as a program. I know for Buff fans, they'd hope, hey, they can be good if they want, just not in this game. So
Yeah, most definitely. And I think a lot of people don't realize, or maybe that weren't following CU at this point last year. I mean, CSU was just as dreadful as we were last year, pretty much. They won 2 games last year. We won 1. And while they have had an impressive recruiting class within the Mountain West this past year, they're still laying the foundation there. And
Yep.
it's still going to take some time. I think for them to find more success within the conference. So, I'm looking forward to this game. I want to see CSU be successful, but definitely not this
Right.
week
Right.
in the Rocky Mountain Showdown. That's something I'm really looking forward to, and hopefully, again, seeing the team win in different ways, seeing Shedeur have success in different ways is something that I'm very interested in and I want to continue to see. So can't wait for that matchup. But with some of the time that we have left, let's go ahead and get into greater college football matchups. I mean, I wish with all the media deals, with all the money that is popping up in college football now, we would have a little bit more of an exciting slate of games this Saturday. But it is what it is. What matchups are you looking forward to? Who do you have your eye on going into this week for quarterback play?
Yeah, there's still some really intriguing, I think, quarterbacks playing and some just quarterback topics in general. And I'm still just like super pumped for the weekend, just like you are. Like, we're junkies. We could care less who's playing as long as there's a bunch of games on. So we're excited. But I think the biggest one for me, if we're just like trying to like low key pick a big one, I got a few. Would be Tennessee and Florida. Joe Milton and Graham Mertz, right? You got Milton and Tennessee, and this was probably a game I'm assuming you wanted to kind of jump on and talk about too. Whenever we were talking about the quarterbacks off air. But if you're like a Tennessee fan, the Milton standpoint, like you want to see more than what you've seen so far. Like, and they played Austin Peay and they really struggled last week. They end up beating them 30-something to 13. And then of course they killed UVA, but you haven't seen the offense do what they want them to do yet. So I take that with a grain of salt, right? There have been several drops, but they haven't got the vertical downfield passing game going yet. In fact, in all of I think he's had 42 completions so far during the year, and 27 of them have been some sort of screen or have been some sort of behind the line of scrimmage throw, right? And that's part of their offense, getting the ball out real quick. But you're going to have to hit him vertical shots. They're only 2 of 9. He's only 2 of 9 of shots 20 plus yards downfield. 5 of 13 with throws between 10 and 19 yards. So you're gonna have to have some intermediate to deep shots, I think, to beat Florida. I know the screen game matters and it's part of their offense, but I think Florida's defense is pretty good, and they're probably going to take that away. They're probably going to let you have those screens. So I think you got to take a shot or 2 deep to win. And last thing with Milton before I hand it over to you and get your thoughts on him, but it's easier for quarterbacks. We talked about this with Quinn Ewers last week. It's easier for quarterbacks or just players in general to get pumped up when you're playing a big opponent, right? Like if you're playing Austin Peay as a team, sometimes it's just the juice isn't there. When you're playing Florida, you're ready to rock and roll. Like we talked about that with Ewers in Texas. When you're playing Rice, sometimes the juice is hard to get there. When you're playing Alabama, freaking lights out, best quarterback, and you know what I mean? So but that's kind of my thought on Milton and Tennessee, and I still think that there's it's too early to write off Milton. Okay, he's not the guy. So, but we'll see him against Florida. We'll definitely see what happens.
Yeah, most definitely. I'm rooting for Milton. Tennessee's been a fun team to watch over the last couple of years, and I know they got that big time freshman quarterback. I'm forgetting his name. Nico.
Nico, I can't pronounce the last name. I'm not even going to try.
I can't remember, but I know that he's definitely probably applying some pressure in terms of he could be that guy. If the offense continues to sputter at different points with Milton, but I would like to think that he brings his A game against Florida, because they really have the opportunity to, I mean, not squash Florida season, but definitely, put it on a damper, so to speak.
Yep.
Graham Mertz, he's going to be somebody that I'm going to be interested to see how he bounces back right now. Again, had a rough performance against University of Utah just a couple weeks ago, and yeah, he's got a tough opponent going up against this Tennessee defense this week. But right now, his stats, it's not a horrible stat line. I mean, 45 of 61. That's pretty good completion percentage. But the yards is a little low. 526 yards, a couple TDs, and a pick. And I think Florida fans, correct me if I'm wrong, y'all are expecting a little bit more production out of that, out of Mertz. And we'll see. He's got a tough challenge ahead of him this game.
Yeah, and I think, like with Milton, too early to write any quarterback off, right? But I think for Mertz to have success against Tennessee, it's similar keys. It's similar. It's similar type of play. He's gonna have to push the ball downfield more than he's been doing. He's gonna have to play well against pressure. I think Tennessee's probably going to do a good job getting pressure. Now, obviously, it was Austin Peay and Virginia they played, but Virginia is nothing to sniff at. It's a Power 5 school, and they had like 20 pressures on UVA, right? Pressures being sacks, hits, hurries, that type of stuff. And so Mertz is going to have to he's probably going to have some pressure. He's going to have to play better than what he did against Utah. Against Utah, he was like 2 of 7 against pressure for 22 yards and a pick, right? So play better against pressure. Man. Yeah, and the stats, it's interesting you missed the stats. Like the box score, if you just look at the box score, like, okay, he's actually played pretty well, and that may be true. But of his 31 completions against Utah, only 6 of those completions went more than 10 yards in the air. So there just wasn't a lot of like vertical threats there. And I'm not saying you can't dink and dunk and get in a rhythm. You have to. But I think to keep up with Tennessee and to beat Tennessee, some deep shots are going to have to be there for both quarterbacks, right? So I think both quarterbacks are similar keys. Going to have to hit them some vertical throws and play well against pressure.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that insight. And I think we can digress here for just a minute. Tanisha Barton brought up a really cool point here. I'm actually excited to see Milroe from Alabama this weekend too. I want to see how he bounces back. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the top matchups last week. Obviously, Milroe was on the losing end of that matchup last week. But yeah, what are your thoughts for Milroe heading into this week? I forget their opponent. I'm gonna have to look this up.
South Florida. They play South Florida.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, it's definitely a game you can get some more confidence back and get your swagger back, for lack of better terms, right? Playing South Florida. But at the same time, it's like improvements have to be made. Is like I was reading some of what Nick Saban was talking about, and he was just talking about, hey, we're evaluating every position. Like, keeps it short, but in the meetings they're talking about, what do we do at quarterback? Do we keep developing Miller? Do we give Tyler Buckner a chance? So I think those questions are up in the air. And of course, I hope the kid goes out and kills it. I love when guys bounce back and they able to shut everyone up and have a good game, right? But the reality of it is who knows what's going to happen, one. And two, I think it's still an interesting storyline, because what if you go in and you kill South Florida? Great, you're supposed to do that. Or what if you go in and struggle a little bit, right? Like, what if something happens? And so I think it's definitely an interesting quarterback topic and storyline, kind of similar to Ohio State's. As there's, they're probably not 100% set on their guy either, but I think it's something that like I'm interested in watching and seeing how that whole quarterback room and quarterback starting position plays out.
Real quick on Alabama.
Yeah.
What's been your assessment of how they've used Milroe so far? Sometimes I feel like they're putting too much pressure for him to be more of a passer maybe than what he is right now. I think maybe he could have provided some opportunity for Alabama to kind of get back to what they've been known for, which has been, that smash mouth football, that kind of Georgia style, now that Kirby Smart has adopted. But I know with having Bryce Young there last year, the offense has in more recent years kind of diverted away from that slightly, become a little bit more pass heavy. And I think I was expecting a little bit more of a deviation back to what they were. But I don't know if we've really seen that so far. But I don't have the stats in front of me or any of the percentages. That's just based off the
Yeah.
eye test of what I've watched. What's your assessment right now on that?
No, I think you're right. I think just from listening to the people talk that are, close to the program, that's what they've tried to do. But like you watch Texas, like their Texas defensive line like dominated the offensive
Yeah.
line. They couldn't get a run game going. So it's hard to play that type of football when the run game isn't getting going. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
they had to start passing. Now I'm sure the the offensive staff is trying to figure out creative ways to get the offense rolling, of course. But ideally, yeah, you heard all off season, like, yeah, they're going to get back to Alabama smash mouth football, this, and that, which is great in theory, but you got to go out and execute too. And that's, like against Middle Tennessee State's one thing, against a super improved Texas team that looked legit is a different thing. So I'm sure they probably wanted to, but I think the offensive line has to gel and get a little bit better before they're able to probably establish that.
Absolutely. The one other matchup that I had on here that I wanted to touch on, maybe you have it on your list too, is Georgia, South Carolina, one of the few, premier matchups. We got Spencer Rattler going up against Carson Beck. Let's hear your breakdown.
Yeah, Carson Beck, this will be his first real test too. I mean, they played Ball State and the FCS school, right? So I still think the jury's out. Like, what do you have? Like, they had a slow start in both those games, Carson Beck and Georgia offensively, right? So I think the jury's out. I think it's a wait and see. But at the same time, Georgia's probably thinking we can still just like suffocate this team and just run the ball and pass here and there. But I still think like we're going to see this game. Like, I think South Carolina is going to be obviously playing with juice, and they're probably a better team than maybe given credit for. I think they're 4 touchdown underdogs. But with Spencer Rattler to pull the upset, like South Carolina's going to have to just play a perfect game as a whole, as a group. Rattler's had a good start to the season, and even the loss against North Carolina, and we talked about this, he actually played still pretty well. He's been lights out when he's been kept clean. He's played pretty good under pressure too. I think he's like 9 of 16 for a $170 touchdown. So he's pushing the ball downfield a lot more this season than last season. Only 2 games, small sample size, but his yards per attempt are up by 3 yards. So he's going to have to continue to do that against Georgia. He's going to have to play lights out under the pressure as well. I think they took like 8 sacks against North Carolina, and he was he was getting hit left and right, but he was delivering some really good throws. So I think he's going to hit some vertical shots, perform well under pressure. And then I think starting off, like, get the ball out quick, try to like avoid as many sacks as possible, try to protect your old line by getting the ball out and like weather the storm, right? If the game's in Georgia, they're going to come out crazy. Like, the last thing you want to happen is like Georgia get up 7-0, then have a fumble, get up 14-0, and they start just like suffocating, right? So I think just weather that storm, and those are the keys for Rattler. But Carson Beck, I mean, yeah, we're going to see this week, like, we may see this week what he's all about, and maybe able just to run the ball and have success. So yeah,
totally. I'll be rooting for the Gamecocks. I think Spencer Rattler, exciting quarterback to watch, and I think he had a great bounce back year last year for with his first year at South Carolina. And man, I mean, what better way to showcase how much you've improved than going up against the back-to-back national champions. So very excited about checking in on that one. Are there any others that we should be keeping our eye on going into this week?
So I got a few. I'll make it like 20 seconds on each, and then if you got anything to add on, maybe you want to go back and touch on it or jump in. So I'm excited to see KJ Jefferson for Arkansas against BYU. It's Arkansas's first real game against a better opponent. They have a new offense from last year, so I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to see how they do against BYU. And BYU got Keaton Slow hit quarterback, so there's that as well, right? So we got BYU, Arkansas, KJ Jefferson. Also, some other ones I'm looking for is Drake May against Minnesota. Like, May's been pretty pedestrian so far this year, I think it's fair to say. They beat South Carolina. He had 2 TDs and 2 interceptions that game. And then they beat App State in overtime, right? Only had 1 touchdown on the ground, so none throwing. So kind of excited to see how he looks against Minnesota. Michael Penix against Michigan State for a few reasons. 1, Penix has been balling, and 2, all the Michigan State stuff, which we don't have to get into. But I'm excited to see Michael Penix and see how Michigan State performs. And then another one that may be kind of gross is West Virginia against Pittsburgh. I guess that's not gross. There's some gross like lowers that. But Phil Jurkovec, Pittsburgh against Garrett Green from West Virginia. Like, Phil Jurkovec, dude, the guy who's got NFL arm, NFL talent, NFL height, all that type of stuff. He was like 10 of 30 last week against Cincinnati, and they lost against Cincinnati. There's some like stuff going on right in that. It's just not a good start for Pittsburgh, right? So I'm excited to see how Djokovic bounces back. And then Garrett Green's a guy from West Virginia who's a good athlete. I think he does some things well with his feet. So not a huge primetime game, especially with, two teams that are 1-on-1 right now. But I think there's some quarterback storylines there that are worth keeping up and watching.
Man, I think that's wonderful. I don't know if I have any comments on this specific these specific matchups, but I did want to highlight an FCS matchup just in case you guys have ESPN Plus or whatever, and that is my Abilene Christian Wildcats from out in West Texas taking on a ranked FCS opponent, and that is Incarnate Word down in San Antonio. Well, it's going to be in Abilene, but Maverick McIver, Texas Tech quarterback transfer. Last year had a great year for us. This year he's off to an awesome start. 5 touchdowns to 0 interceptions. It's going to be important. If we win, it's going to be based on his arm. And yeah, we run all that the spread offense, and it's an exciting offense to run right now with him.
Dude, what time's that game? You gonna be tuned in? You gonna be dialed in wearing your purple?
I might be because CU's game doesn't start till freaking 8:00 Mountain. So this is at 6 p.m. I don't know if that's Mountain or Central time, but either way, I'm gonna have time to check in and watch it for a little bit. So for those. If you're checking in on this video, I went to Abilene Christian for undergrad. I went to the University of Colorado for graduate school. So definitely keeping tabs on both schools this week.
You said Incarnate Word. Do you know off the top of your head who their quarterback is?
Oh man, I'll need to go look at it.
So it's Zach Calzada, the A&M quarterback who transferred to Auburn. And now, and he had a really, really good game last week, like a really good game. I forgot who they played, but the stats got sent to me. But Zach Calzada. So we got 2 Power 5 bounce back quarterbacks facing off. Look at this, talking some FCS football.
Man, yeah, I think Calzada was the guy who went in when A&M came up here a couple years ago to play CU at Mile High, and man, that was an ugly game, but. No, it is what it is. I have a quick question for you.
Yes.
Texas, number 4. You're right there in Austin, taking on Wyoming. Is Quinn Ewers, is he a first-round draft pick right now?
Hell yeah. If you played like last week, absolutely. Like, people are going to see that and be like, we can work with that. Now he's got to play better the whole season, right? But yeah, that's first-round draft pick all over him, like the way he played against Alabama. So you gotta have more than one good game, but yeah, everyone's hyped, and down here in Austin, everyone is, we're back. Or not, I'm not part of Texas, but they're back. But with how they looked on Saturday, I mean, geez, like that was. You haven't seen a Texas team just establish their dominance like that before, like in a while, and to do it against a team that is always so used to dominating other people, but was impressive. So it's fun to watch regardless.
Yeah. And Tanisha Barton's chiming in here saying another Austin person. I love to see it. Before we wrap up, again, I think it's been a little bit since I've given viewers a little bit of a background on you, but would love for you to share what you're up to in Austin, and what you do, who you are, what you're all about.
Yeah, well, that's kind of you, David. I don't know if anyone really cares about me, but yeah. So we the QB Spotlight is just a big like quarterback hub that we run, and we have like quarterback film previews and recaps that we do during the season. Then out of the season, we spend more time with podcasts and interviews with current and former quarterbacks that come on the show, with current and former coaches that come on. Just give some like really cool insight, more like nitty gritty stuff, but definitely like quarterback junkie, college football junkie stuff. And here in Austin, we train a bunch of a lot of MLB guys and NFL guys as far as like the weight room, speed and conditioning, the sports performance side of things go. So that's kind of what we do here. And then the quarterback spotlight stuff is just something that kind of taken off a little bit. And, but yeah, if you like quarterback content, feel free to come over and hang with us. So it's a fun time.
Yes, I've for those who are watching on my channel, I've linked Steven's channel in my description. So please go on and give him a sub and a like when you check out his videos. I've been learning a lot from you, man. So appreciate your time as always, and especially being so gracious. Going a little long today, but any last words before we shut this thing down?
Man, I'm always excited for college football, regardless if there's not huge matchups or not. So I remember we only get like 13 of these things a year, so let's go enjoy it no matter what. And David, you're turning me into kind of a Colorado fan, dude. So I'll keep pulling for y'all. So yeah.
Yes, likewise. And man, like we got to catch a game at some point, whether it's out here or I'm gonna have a ton of reasons to get down to Texas next year with CU being in the Big 12. So we definitely need to do it. Appreciate you as always, and want to give a shout out to everybody in the chat. I'm sorry I did not get to all of the different comments and things like that, but big shout outs again to Ryan Nicole, Giggity, Green Creole, Tyler Banks, Jay Baru, Natisha Barton, Derek Johnson, and Zine, everybody else that's been in the chat. Appreciate seeing you guys in here as well as talking with each other in the chat. I'd love to see that. So until next time, we'll see you next week, Steven. And as always, Sco Buffs. All right.